Handcuffs bit into a teenager's wrists while two grinning officers mocked his tears, completely unaware they were digging their own professional graves. They thought they had cornered a helpless kid from the wrong side of town. They had no idea his father was the city's most ruthless federal judge. Neon signs from a dying strip mall cast long, distorted shadows across the wet asphalt of Route 42. Soren Harlan gripped the steering wheel of his hand-me-down Honda Civic, knuckles white, keeping his eyes locked on the speedometer. The 17-year-old was riding the high of a major victory. On the passenger seat rested a heavy brass trophy. First place state regional debate championship. He was exhausted, wearing a thrift store suit that was slightly too broad in the shoulders, but he could not stop smiling. He was nearly home, mentally rehearsing how he would tell his father about the final round. Red and blue lights suddenly exploded in his rear-view mirror, fracturing the quiet darkness. Soren's heart dropped into his stomach. The smile vanished. He immediately eased off the accelerator, flicked on his turn signal, and pulled smoothly onto the gravel shoulder. He shifted the car into park, turned off the engine, rolled down his window, and placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel at 10 and 2. It was a drill his father had rehearsed with him 100 times. No sudden movements. Speak clearly. Survive the encounter. Two car doors slammed shut behind him. Heavy boots crunched against the gravel. Officer Colton Briggs approached the driver's side, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. Briggs was a veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department, a man whose thick neck and permanent scowl were well known in the city's poorer districts. Approaching the passenger side was Officer Julian Ellis, a rookie barely out of the academy, eager to please and easily molded by his senior partner's aggressive tactics. Briggs shone a blinding maglite directly into Soren's eyes. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Briggs barked, his voice dripping with unwarranted hostility. "Yes, officer," Soren said softly, squinting against the harsh glare. "My wallet is in my right back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. May I reach for them?" Briggs scoffed, exchanging a look with Ellis over the roof of the car. "Listen to this one, Julian. Sounds like a textbook." "Go ahead, boy. Nice and slow. Don't try anything stupid." Soren carefully retrieved his documents and handed them out the window. Briggs snatched them, glancing at the name and the address. The address was in an affluent gated community across town, a detail that seemed to instantly irritate the veteran officer. "Soren Harlan," Briggs read aloud, mispronouncing the first name intentionally. "You're a long way from home, Soren. Whose car is this? Because a kid like you sure doesn't live in Whispering Pines." "It's my car, sir. It's registered in my name. I'm coming back from a debate tournament at the university." "Debate tournament?" Briggs sneered. He leaned closer, invading Soren's space, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and cheap peppermint gum. "You look nervous, kid. You got anything in this vehicle I need to know about? Weapons, drugs?" "No, officer. Absolutely not." "Step out of the vehicle." Soren froze. "Officer, was I speeding? Why am I being asked to step out?" "I said, step out of the vehicle," Briggs shouted, violently yanking the driver's side door open. "Are you resisting, boy? Because I will pull you out by your cheap collar." "I'm complying, sir," Soren said quickly, unbuckling his seatbelt and stepping out into the cold night air. "Hands on the hood. Spread them." Briggs shoved Soren roughly against the cold metal of the Honda. Soren bit his lip, forcing himself to stay silent, as Briggs kicked his legs apart, patting him down with aggressive, intrusive force. On the passenger side, Ellis had opened the door and was tearing through Soren's belongings. The rookie grabbed the debate trophy and tossed it carelessly onto the floorboards, pulling out Soren's meticulously organized briefing binders and dumping the papers across the front seats. "Find anything, Julian?" Briggs called out, keeping a heavy forearm pressed against the back of Soren's neck. "Just a bunch of papers and school junk," Ellis replied, sounding almost disappointed. "Pop the trunk," Briggs ordered. He yanked Soren backward by the shoulder and spun him around. "Sit on the curb. Do not move." Soren sat on the wet concrete, shivering in his thin suit jacket, watching helplessly as the two officers dismantled the interior of his car. They ripped the lining out of the trunk, tossed his spare tire onto the gravel, and dumped his backpack upside down. Textbooks, pens, and highlighters scattered into the muddy puddles by the roadside. "This is completely illegal," Soren murmured, unable to hold back the protest any longer. "You have no probable cause to search my vehicle." Briggs stopped, slowly turning around. He walked over and stood directly over the teenager. "What did you say to me, you little punk?" I said you don't have probable cause. I didn't commit a traffic violation. A cruel smile stretched across Briggs's face. He reached to his belt and unclipped his handcuffs. Is that right? Well, Mr. Lawyer, I say I smelled marijuana. I say you were swerving over the yellow line. And now I say you're resisting a lawful order and acting belligerent. Before Soren could process the threat, Briggs hauled him off the curb by his lapels. The officer spun him around, slamming him face first into the side of the cruiser. Metal bit into Soren's wrists as the handcuffs were ratcheted down so tightly they cut off his circulation. Officer Ellis, Briggs barked, read this piece of garbage his rights. We're taking him in for suspected DUI and resisting arrest. Ellis hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the terrified, completely sober high school student. But the rookie quickly buried his conscience, clearing his throat and reciting the Miranda rights. Soren closed his eyes, a single tear cutting through the dirt on his cheek. He did not fight. He did not yell. He just let the cold reality of the metal cuffs sink in, knowing that his survival depended entirely on his silence. The fluorescent lights of the Oak Creek precinct buzzed with a maddening insect-like hum. The station smelled of bleach, stale sweat, and cheap burnt coffee. Soren was dragged through the double doors by his bicep, his wrists aching terribly, his suit jacket now torn at the shoulder seam. Desk Sergeant Merrick barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as Briggs and Ellis hauled the teenager to the booking counter. "What do we have here, Briggs?" Merrick mumbled, chewing on the end of a blue pen. "Caught this one out on Route 42. Briggs bragged, shoving Soren slightly so that he bumped against the high wooden counter. "Erratic driving. Smelled like a brewery, though I couldn't find the bottles. Got mouthy, resisted arrest. Standard trash." Soren stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He knew the playbook. Any display of anger, any attempt to defend his honor right now would only result in additional charges or a beating in the holding cells where the cameras conveniently malfunctioned. "Empty your pockets, kid," Ellis instructed, unlocking the cuffs. Soren rubbed his raw red wrists and silently complied. He placed his wallet, his car keys, and a pack of spearmint gum on the counter. Briggs snatched the wallet, flipping it open and pulling out Soren's driver's license. "Still trying to figure out how a kid like you affords a zip code like this," Briggs taunted, waving the ID in Soren's face. "Your mom scrubbing toilets for some rich folks over in Whispering Pines? Is that how you got the address?" "My mother passed away from cancer years ago," Soren said, his voice terrifyingly flat and devoid of emotion. Briggs laughed, a dry barking sound. "Boo-hoo. Take off your shoelaces, your belt, and your tie. You're going in cell 4. "I am entitled to my phone call," Soren stated, looking directly into Briggs's eyes. "You'll get your call when I feel like giving it to you," Briggs snapped, stepping forward to intimidate the teen. But Soren did not flinch. He just stood there, stripped of his belt and tie, holding on to a quiet, ironclad dignity that seemed to infuriate the older cop even more. "Give him the phone, Marek," Ellis muttered, looking around nervously. "Let's just process the paperwork and get it over with." Briggs rolled his eyes, grabbed a heavy black receiver from the wall-mounted rotary phone, and shoved it at Soren's chest. "Make it quick. Go ahead, call your daddy. Tell him you're a criminal." Soren dialed a number from memory. He did not dial a cell phone. He dialed a direct restricted landline. Miles away in the heart of the city's downtown judicial district, the Honorable Leander Voss was sitting in his cavernous mahogany-paneled chambers. At 52 years old, Leander Voss was a towering figure in the legal world. Appointed to the federal bench a decade ago, he was famously known in the press as the Iron Gavel. He was brilliant, uncompromising, and absolutely terrifying to corrupt prosecutors and lazy defense attorneys alike. He had just finished presiding over a grueling late-night emergency injunction regarding a civil rights dispute. Leander was exhausted. He was still wearing his heavy black judicial robe, the silk rustling slightly as he reached for the glass of scotch on his desk. Before his fingers could touch the glass, the private, unlisted red phone on his desk rang. Only 3 people in the world had that number. Leander picked up the receiver instantly. "Voss." "Dad." Leander's blood ran cold. The voice was trembling, stripped of its usual confident cadence. "Soren, where are you? Are you all right?" "I'm at the Oak Creek precinct," Soren said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Dad, they pulled me over. They tore the car apart. They threw me against the hood and arrested me. They're charging me with resisting arrest and suspected DUI." Leander stood up so fast his heavy leather chair slammed into the bookshelves behind him. "Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay. My wrists are cut up from the cuffs. They threw my debate trophy in the mud." Through the receiver, Leander could hear a voice laughing in the background. "Officer Briggs, tell Daddy to bring a blank check, kid. It's gonna be a long night." A terrifying silence fell over Leander Voss, the kind of silence that preceded a hurricane. All the warmth of a loving father vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, calculating wrath of a federal judge whose life's work was dismantling systemic injustice. "Soren," Leander said, his voice dangerously soft and perfectly level, "do not say another word to them. Do not answer any questions. Do not sign anything. I am on my way." The line went dead. Leander did not bother changing into his street clothes. He did not grab his briefcase. He simply threw his heavy wool trench coat over his black judicial robes, snatched his car keys, and walked out of his chambers. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Back at the precinct, Soren hung up the phone and handed it back to Briggs. "Well," Briggs sneered, leaning against the booking counter with a smug grin, "is Daddy coming to bail his little thug out, or was he too drunk to answer?" Soren looked at the two officers, a strange quiet calm settling over him. The fear was gone. "He's on his way," Soren said quietly, walking himself over to the holding cell and sitting down on the metal bench. "And you should probably call your union representative." Briggs and Ellis burst into laughter, high-fiving each other as they walked toward the break room for more coffee. They thought it was the funniest thing they had heard all night. They had absolutely no idea that the ticking clock on their careers had just reached its final hour. Tires of a heavy black Lincoln Town car squealed violently against the pavement, jumping the curb and parking diagonally across 3 designated police spots directly in front of the Oak Creek precinct. Leander Voss shoved the heavy car door open before the engine had even fully stopped humming. The freezing night wind whipped the unbuttoned edges of his wool trench coat, revealing the heavy black silk of his judicial robe underneath. He did not walk. He marched. His strides were long, purposeful, and practically vibrating with an icy, controlled rage that had commanded courtrooms for over a decade. Inside the precinct, Desk Sergeant Merrick was still lazily filling in the crossword puzzle. The heavy double doors of the entrance did not just open. They flew violently apart, slamming against the plaster walls with a concussive boom that made Merrick flinch and drop his blue pen. Leander stood in the doorway. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast severe, uncompromising shadows across his sharp jawline and piercing dark eyes. He took 3 deliberate steps into the room, unfastening his trench coat and shrugging it off his shoulders. He draped it effortlessly over the nearest wooden bench. Now he stood entirely in his federal judge's robe, the dark fabric hanging with the gravity of the law itself. Merrick stood up, suddenly highly aware of his untucked uniform shirt. "Excuse me, sir, you can't just barge in." "My name is Leander Voss," the judge interrupted, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that echoed off the linoleum floors. It was not a shout. It was a command that demanded absolute silence. "I am a sitting judge on the United States District Court. You are currently holding my son, Soren Harlan. You have precisely 60 seconds to bring him to this counter, or I will have the FBI kick down these doors and arrest every single officer in this building for kidnapping and civil rights violations." Merrick's mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land. The color drained completely from his face. He looked at the black robe, then at the man's furious eyes, and a terrifying realization hit him like a freight train. Judge Leander Voss, the iron gavel. Judge Voss, Your Honor, Merrick stammered, his hands shaking as he hovered over his computer keyboard. "I didn't process the arrest, sir. Officers Briggs and Ellis brought him in. They said—" "I care exceptionally little about what they said," Leander stated, stepping directly up to the booking counter and leaning over it, his presence swallowing the space. "Where is my son?" Before Merrick could hit the intercom, the door to the break room swung open. Officer Colton Briggs strutted out, a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hand, chuckling at a joke Officer Julian Ellis had just made behind him. "Hey, Merrick!" Briggs barked, completely oblivious to the towering figure in black standing at the counter. "Did the punk's daddy show up to pay his tab yet? Tell me the apple doesn't fall far from the trashy tree." Leander turned slowly. He locked eyes with Briggs. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating, and heavy enough to crush bone. Briggs stopped dead in his tracks. The smug grin slid off his face so fast it was almost comical. His eyes darted from Leander's stern, aristocratic face to the unmistakable black judicial robe, and finally to the polished leather shoes. Ellis, stepping out behind his partner, bumped into Briggs' back, peered over his shoulder, and physically recoiled as if he had been slapped. "Are you the officer who arrested the young man in cell 4? Leander asked, his tone deceptively quiet. Briggs managed to choke out, his chest suddenly tightening. He tried to puff himself up, relying on years of street intimidation, but it evaporated under Leander's withering stare. He was driving erratically, suspected DUI, resisting. Fascinating. Leander cut him off smoothly. He reached into the pocket of his robe, pulled out a small leather notepad and a gold fountain pen. "Badge number." "Excuse me?" Briggs said, his bravado twitching back to life. "Listen, pal, I don't care what costume you're wearing. Your kid broke the law." "Badge number," Leander repeated, stepping away from the counter and walking directly toward Briggs. He stopped mere inches from the veteran cop. "You have detained a minor without notifying his legal guardian. You have subjected a 17-year-old child with no criminal record to an illegal search and seizure, violating his Fourth Amendment rights. You have falsified charges of driving under the influence without administering a breathalyzer, a field sobriety test, or a blood draw. And you have laid hands on my son, leaving contusions on his wrists. Now, give me your badge number, or I will call Chief Donovan Hale right now and have him suspend you before this coffee gets cold." At the mention of the chief of police, Ellis visibly panicked. "Officer Ellis, badge 8492, sir." The rookie blurted out, his voice cracking. "And Officer Briggs is badge 4421. "Shut up, Julian," Briggs hissed, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. He glared at Leander. "You think because you're a judge you can intimidate me? Your kid was acting suspicious. I smelled weed. That gives me probable cause to search." "Is that your official statement?" Leander asked, jotting the numbers down with elegant strokes of his pen. "You smelled marijuana." "Yeah, I did." Leander snapped the notebook shut. "Excellent. That will be very useful when we review the dash cam footage." Speaking of which, Leander turned to Sergeant Merrick, who was sweating profusely behind the desk. "Sergeant, under authority of the federal bench, I am issuing a verbal preservation order for all dash cam footage from Car 14, all body camera footage from Officers Briggs and Ellis, and all internal precinct surveillance from the last several hours. If a single frame of data goes missing, is corrupted, or is accidentally deleted, I will hold you personally in contempt of federal court. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor. Crystal clear, Your Honor," Marek practically shouted, frantically typing commands into his terminal to lock the files. "Good. Now, unlock cell 4. Marek scrambled from his stool, grabbing a heavy ring of keys and sprinting down the short hallway. Leander followed closely behind, ignoring the two paralyzed arresting officers. When Leander reached the holding cell, his imposing demeanor fractured for just a fraction of a second. Soren was sitting on the steel bench, shoeless, his suit jacket torn, rubbing his bruised red wrists. When the teenager looked up and saw his father, his lip trembled. "Dad," Soren whispered. Leander stepped into the cell the moment the bars slid open. He did not say a word, he just wrapped his arms around his son, pulling him into a fierce, protective embrace. The black silk of the robe enveloped the shivering boy. For a long moment, the formidable federal judge was just a terrified, infinitely relieved father. "I've got you, Soren," Leander murmured into his son's hair. "I've got you. It's over." Leander gently pulled back, inspecting the raw, bleeding skin around Soren's wrists. A fresh wave of fury ignited in the judge's eyes, but he kept his voice soothing for his son. "Let's go home." As father and son walked back into the booking area, Briggs was leaning against the wall, trying to maintain a facade of defiance. Ellis looked like he was about to vomit. "This isn't over," Briggs sneered, unable to keep his mouth shut. "He still has charges pending. I'm writing the report right now." Leander paused halfway to the door. He turned, placing a protective hand on Soren's shoulder. "You are absolutely right, Officer Briggs." Leander said, his voice ringing with a chilling finality. "This is far from over. By tomorrow morning, the Department of Justice will open a formal investigation into this precinct's arrest statistics, specifically focusing on racially motivated traffic stops. By tomorrow afternoon, my private attorney will file a federal civil rights lawsuit against you, Officer Ellis, and the city. And by the end of the month, you will be begging for a plea deal to avoid federal prison. Enjoy your coffee. It's the last one you'll drink with a badge on your chest." Leander pushed the double doors open, guiding Soren out into the cold night air, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. The fallout was biblical. Leander Voss did not make empty threats. The following morning, Chief of Police Donovan Hale was standing in Leander's downtown chambers, profusely apologizing and sweating through his uniform. But apologies meant nothing to a father who had seen his son treated like an animal. The twist that truly nailed the coffin shut on Briggs's career did not even come from the police dashcam, which conveniently experienced a glitch regarding its audio recording. It came from Soren's car. Unbeknownst to Briggs and Ellis, the hand-me-down Honda Civic was equipped with a dual-facing, motion-activated dash camera that uploaded directly to a secure cloud server. The camera captured everything: the flawless compliance by Soren, the aggressive hostility of Briggs, the illegal search, the destruction of the debate materials, and the crystal-clear audio of Briggs openly admitting to fabricating the charges just to teach the rich punk a lesson. When the footage was released to the Internal Affairs Division, the investigation exploded. It did not just stay in Oak Creek. It caught the attention of regional news outlets. The video of the veteran cop violently assaulting an honors student in a thrift store suit, followed by the revelation that the teenager was the son of the state's most prominent federal judge, dominated the headlines for weeks. Officer Julian Ellis folded quickly, facing the terrifying wrath of a federal judge and undeniable video evidence. The rookie hired a lawyer and agreed to turn state's witness against his senior partner. Ellis testified that Briggs routinely fabricated probable cause, targeted minority drivers driving out of low-income neighborhoods, and used excessive force. Ellis confessed that he had been too terrified of Briggs's influence in the police union to speak up earlier. Because of his cooperation, Ellis avoided jail time, but the karma was absolute. He was dishonorably discharged from the force, stripped of his certifications, and permanently blacklisted from ever working in law enforcement, security, or public service again. He ended up taking a minimum wage job, working the night shift at a warehouse, entirely stripped of the authority he had so carelessly abused. For Colton Briggs, the hammer of justice swung with devastating, unparalleled force. The police union abandoned him the second the cloud footage went public. The Fraternal Order wanted nothing to do with a man who had practically handed a federal judge the ammunition to audit their entire department. Briggs was immediately suspended without pay, then formally terminated weeks later. But losing his badge was only the beginning. The district attorney, feeling the immense pressure from the federal bench and the public outcry, brought the absolute maximum charges against the disgraced officer. Briggs was indicted for official misconduct, aggravated assault, filing a false police report, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. During the trial, Briggs sat at the defense table, a shrunken, bitter man. He wore a cheap gray suit, ironically similar to the one Soren had worn on the night of the arrest. When it was time for victim impact statements, Leander did not speak. He sat in the front row of the gallery, his face an impenetrable mask, watching as his son took the stand. Soren Harlan, holding the confidence of a state regional debate champion, looked directly at the man who had terrified him in the dark. "You didn't see me that night," Soren told the silent courtroom, his voice steady and echoing clearly off the wood-paneled walls. "You saw a stereotype. You saw someone you thought had no voice, no power, and no recourse. You thought you could strip me of my dignity in the dirt on the side of Route 42. But my dignity doesn't come from your permission. And justice doesn't bend to your prejudice." The jury deliberated briefly, guilty on all counts. The presiding judge sentenced Colton Briggs to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. As the bailiff stepped forward to place the handcuffs on Briggs's wrists, the metal clicking sharply in the quiet courtroom, Briggs finally looked back at the gallery. He looked at Leander Voss. Leander did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply gave a single slow nod, watching as the man who had humiliated his son was led away in chains, his life in ruins. Karma had not just knocked on Briggs's door, it had kicked it off the hinges. Months later, the Oak Creek precinct underwent a massive federally mandated overhaul. Chief Hale took early retirement, and a stringent new protocol was instituted regarding traffic stops, complete with mandatory, unalterable body camera policies. Life for the Voss family slowly returned to normal, but the bond between father and son had forged into something unbreakable. On a warm evening, Soren walked across the stage of his high school auditorium, graduating with honors. As he accepted his diploma, he looked out into the crowd. Sitting in the front row, wearing a tailored suit instead of a black robe, Leander Voss clapped the loudest, his eyes shining with pride. They had faced the darkness of abuse and corruption, and they had won, not just with power, but with the undeniable blazing light of the truth. If this story of absolute karma and the fierce protection of a father sent chills down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories of justice served. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes to light. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were in the judge's shoes? Hi, my name is Board Justice, the owner and manager of Board Justice. After watching the video, 2 cops humiliated a black teen. Then his father walked in wearing a judge's robe. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was relief that respect and accountability eventually found their way into the situation. What stayed with me most wasn't the surprise of who Soren's father was, but the reminder that every young person deserves to be treated with fairness, patience, and dignity from the very first moment, regardless of assumptions. I'm curious which part had the biggest impact on you. Was it the traffic stop, the moment Judge Voss walked into the station, or the way the truth finally came to light? And if you had witnessed that encounter, what do you think the officers should have done differently from the start? One lesson I took from this story is that slowing down before making assumptions can completely change the outcome of an interaction. In everyday life, showing respect first often prevents problems that are difficult to undo later. If this story gave you something to think about, I'd really enjoy reading your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about justice, accountability, and treating people fairly, feel free to like the video or subscribe if you think it's worth your time.